My name is Madeline Quinn, 29 years old, head nurse at a public hospital in Seattle. I had barely stepped into the cafe when he said the words that shattered my entire life. I can't marry you. Without a single explanation, Travis, the man I had loved for 6 years, slipped the ring off my finger and told me he had fallen for someone else. Charlotte Langley, daughter of billionaire Elliot Langley. When I returned to our shared apartment, I found all my belongings neatly placed out in the hallway, cold, meticulous, as if I had never existed. Have you ever been erased by the person you trusted most, all in a single afternoon? If this story strikes a chord in you, leave a comment, like, and follow the channel. Because in the next part, I'll tell you what happened when I stepped inside the Langley mansion. I don't know how long I sat on the stone steps outside my old apartment. The single duffel bag I had managed to grab lay quietly beside me, a silent testament that I once lived here. Strangers glanced at me, some with curiosity, some pretending not to see. No one stopped. And I didn't blame them. How could they know they were looking at someone who had just been pushed out of her own life? Eventually I turned on my phone. My finger almost instinctively scrolled to a familiar name, Diane Carter. I hadn't called her in nearly 2 years. Not because we had a falling out. After I graduated, got a job, and found a boyfriend, I simply believed I had moved on. From the days of being abandoned, passed from house to house. I was no longer a child needing care. I was an adult, with a plan, with a future. And now, I had nothing but a shock and 2 empty hands. At the 3rd ring, she picked up. Madeline? Her voice was the same, calm, soft, so steady it made me break down. I couldn't get a word out. Just a gasp, like a sob. Where are you? She asked, not surprised. More like she had sensed this would happen all along. Outside the old apartment. Travis's mom, I didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to hear it. Then came the rustle of fabric and a firm reply. Stay there, I'm coming. Diane showed up in under an hour. Same old SUV, still spotless. Same charcoal knit coat, silver hair tied neatly at the back. She asked nothing, offered no hug, made no fuss. She simply opened the car door, placed a warm water bottle on the passenger seat, and said gently, "Let's go home." Her house hadn't changed. Tucked into an aging neighborhood in South Seattle, where autumn arrived sooner than the polished neighborhoods near the lake. Same old fabric couch with tiny floral prints. Same scent of mint and baked goods wafting from the kitchen. I used to hate this place. It reminded me I had no biological parents, no real home. But that night, it felt warmer than anywhere I'd ever lived. She poured me tea, placed it in my hands. You don't have to talk unless you're ready, you're safe here. I don't know what made me cry. Maybe it was those words. Or maybe the way she sat beside me, hands resting calmly, eyes fully on me. So I told her everything, without holding back. From the cold goodbye, to Charlotte Langley, to my emptied apartment, to the feeling of being discarded like an out-of-season coat. She didn't interrupt, simply nodded, then finally said, "You still have worth, Madeline, no matter who walks away." I slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, the same spot I slept at 17 after a foster family returned me to the system for being a poor fit. The old thick blanket was still there, new detergent scent, same comforting weight. I woke up at 4 a.m., not from a nightmare, but from a racing mind. Where would I go? What would I do? Was there any hope left? The next morning I got up early. Diane had made waffles and brewed coffee, like I'd never left. "What do you plan to do next?" she asked. I wrapped both hands around the mug. "I'm going back to work at the hospital, business as usual. As for where to live, I'll figure that out after payday. Stay as long as you need. I won't ask anything more. But please don't punish yourself. You weren't wrong for loving, you just trusted the wrong person." My throat tightened. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital for my shift. No one knew what had happened, except a few close colleagues. Others still asked about the wedding, the date, the dress. I brushed it off, saying, "We postponed a bit. Travis is swamped with work." I buried the truth, because if I said it out loud, I might collapse right there in the hallway where I once walked so confidently. I buried myself in work like a machine, but every smile felt strained, every gesture mechanical. Some noticed, some didn't. I didn't care. I had one thought: I need to leave this city, leave the past, leave the name Travis Walker, before it chokes what's left of me. The problem was, I didn't know how or where. But a faint light flickered on the third day I returned to work. A throwaway comment from the night shift head nurse would open an entirely new door. I was checking an elderly patient's heart rate in room 206 when Rachel, the evening shift nurse manager, poked her head in. "Madeline, you still want out of here?" I looked up, startled. "Excuse me?" She rolled her eyes, lowered her voice, and stepped inside. "I know a job. Private care, no night shifts, no hospital, no familiar faces, and the pay triple what we make here." I frowned, wondering if this was some kind of temporary comfort joke. Private care for who? Elliot Langley. I froze. Langley, as in Charlotte Langley? Exactly. Her father, tech billionaire, CEO of Langley Dynamics, had an accident a few months ago, now partially paralyzed, needs full-time medical care. Last nurse quit in under 2 weeks. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed no. But then I saw flashes. My old apartment, Diane's worried face, the bank account down to 3 digits. Does he know who I am? No, the referral only sent your file, no photo. But if you want, I have the contact info for the housekeeper. Her name's Hannah, tough as nails but fair. That night I sat alone in my foster mom's kitchen, hands wrapped around a still warm ginger tea. I picked up the phone, put it down, 5 times. Then I dialed. A woman's voice answered. Precise, clipped, like she'd once served in the military. Whitby Estate. "Hello ma'am, this is Madeline Quinn. I was referred for the full-time nursing position with Mr. Langley. Can you come for an interview at 9 a.m. tomorrow? Bring your certifications, medical records and ID, dress properly, the address will follow this call." The next morning I left Seattle early, driving a rental car onto the ferry to Whidbey Island. The sky was gray. Fog blanketed the water like a quiet wool sheet. I'd visited the island during college but never gone this far north, where land was so expensive even Google Maps blurred out the private roads. The mansion appeared behind a tall black iron gate, secured with a license plate scanner. I held up the invitation card to the camera. The gate opened slowly, like it was weighing both my face and my intentions. The stone-paved driveway wound through rows of crimson maple trees. More museum than residence. The house itself was silver gray, built in a modern style, glass, metal, and sharp lines. I climbed the front steps, took a deep breath, and rang the bell. The door opened. Charlotte Langley, with her flawless blonde hair, elegant cream dress, and the same face I once saw printed on my own wedding invitation, was standing there. She blinked once, then smiled, as if I were a delivery person. "You are Madeline Quinn. I'm here to interview for Mr. Langley's nursing position." A pause. Then she tilted her head slightly and smiled. "Ah, right, come in." Not a hint that she recognized me. Or maybe she did, and was simply choosing to pretend she didn't. I stepped into the foyer. My heels echoed sharply on the marble floor in the painfully quiet space. "Hold on, I'll call the housekeeper." Charlotte disappeared behind a frosted glass door. I used the moment to look around. Everything in the house was pristine, from the way the paintings were hung to the spotless brass trim, but I didn't feel life. Only money and power, perfectly framed. An older woman stepped out. Her silver hair was pinned up, her steel-gray eyes unwavering. "I'm Hannah, head housekeeper of Whidbey Estate. Please follow me to the study." She led me down a long hallway where light from a glass dome streamed down like a stage spotlight. The interview was swift and sharp like a military drill. Medical experience? Graduated top of my nursing class, 5 years of experience including ICU and rehabilitation. Do you fear pressure? No. Any personal relationship with anyone in the Langley family? Oh, I lied perfectly. Finally, she closed the file and looked up. "Mr. Langley is controlling. He's not pleasant, but he needs an outsider. Someone unrelated to finance, with no political motive. I reviewed your background. You're suitable. If you accept, you'll live here. Second floor, room adjacent to the patient, base salary $14,000 a month. Room, board included. 2 days off a month. 60-day probation contract. Any questions? I swallowed hard. When do I start? Tomorrow, 6 a.m. You'll meet him at 7. And she stood, extended her hand. Welcome to Whidbey Estate, Miss Quinn. I met Elliot Langley for the first time at exactly 7 a.m. just as scheduled. His room was 3 times the size of mine, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto a misty sea. Everything was designed to be minimal and cold. Black leather chairs, slate-gray bookshelves, a wall clock without a second hand. No family photos, no flowers, no art, nothing that hinted at a life once lived with warmth. He sat in a silver electric wheelchair, posture slightly hunched, eyes sharper than any patient I had ever encountered. There was no confusion, no fear like you usually see in someone who's lost control of half their body. Only alertness. You're the new nurse? His voice was low, steady, devoid of greeting. I nodded, stepped forward and offered my hand. Madeline Quinn. I'm here to support your treatment and rehabilitation. He didn't shake my hand, just glanced at it. How old are you? 29. Married? I looked up, calm. I'm here to provide medical care, not fill out a personal questionnaire. He stared a moment longer, then turned away. Good, at least you're not soft. The first morning passed in silence and standoff. I checked his blood pressure, his medications, drew up a therapy plan, but he rejected everything. No acupuncture, no physical therapy, no muscle stimulation. Only pills, then a command for me to leave. I didn't react. I held on to Hannah's advice. If he's controlling, don't resist, but don't give up. I didn't fully understand what she meant, until I stumbled across something no one else in that house seemed to know. On the evening of the 3rd day, while checking the medical supply cabinet, I found a small bag stuffed into the upper corner. Inside was a neuromuscular stimulator. A device only used if a patient still had the ability to transmit signals to their legs. I brought it down to his room, but didn't ask anything yet. I needed to watch more. The next day, during a routine skin and muscle check to prevent bed sores, I tested a small reflex. I pressed lightly below his right knee, a spot that, if responsive, would twitch. Elliot frowned. A subtle jerk rippled through. He saw me notice it, and instead of denying it, he straightened his back. I still have sensation. Partially. I looked at him, steady. Then why refuse therapy? He didn't answer immediately. For the first time I saw something. Not weakness, but hesitation. What do you know about my daughter? I hesitated. I couldn't exactly say I was once engaged to her current fiancé, only that she's involved in some of your company operations. He gave a dry, hollow laugh like wind scraping against concrete. She doesn't manage anything, she's just waiting for me to die. I froze. He continued, as if releasing a weight that had long sat on his chest. I had a skiing accident in Davos 3 months ago. Not due to carelessness, I always ski with someone, but that day, my companion was late. I survived but ended up paralyzed. While I was still in the hospital bed, Charlotte brought in papers, said it was a temporary power of attorney. I signed. 3 days later, I no longer had control over the company I'd built. A chill ran down my spine. And Travis Walker? I asked, my voice barely steady. You know him? He was the one who called off our engagement, because of Charlotte. He smirked. Looks like we have something in common. I took a deep breath. The room suddenly felt smaller. Why haven't you fought back? You still have sensation, you're still sharp. Why let them lock you in your own home? Because I don't know who in this house is truly mine. Every caretaker before you came and disappeared. 2 private doctors I hired were gone in less than a week. 1 falsely accused. 1 forced to sign an NDA and fired. What about Hannah? She's neutral, but she doesn't interfere. You're the first person here with no ties to investors, no financial leverage, no blood relation. I fell silent, and suddenly I understood why Hannah said I was the right fit. Do you believe me? He asked. I looked him straight in the eye. I believe what you just said, and I believe that leg reflex was real. He gave a slight nod. Then help me. Not to heal, help me take back control. Ow. Start with rebuilding muscle strength, and, he paused. Keep an eye on Charlotte and Travis. They're preparing a special shareholder meeting. If I don't show up, the transfer of ownership becomes permanent. A wave of fear and fury rushed through me. I thought I was just here to mend my own wounds. I didn't realize I had stepped into the heart of the most intricate war of inheritance and betrayal I had ever witnessed. I'm a nurse, not a spy. You're the only one in this house with nothing to lose. And that makes you more dangerous than anyone. He didn't smile. Still, I saw it in his eyes. I had become more than someone on the payroll. I had become his final ace. I had never been prepared for that, but I had also never backed away from what I believed was right. We begin tomorrow before the sun rises. Elliot nodded with something almost like hope no one knew, but from that moment, the battle inside Whitby Estate had officially begun. The entire mansion fell silent after 11 p.m. The garden lights switched to sleep mode, the hallway dimmed, and the security system glowed a muted green on the control panel. I marked that hour as a small incision in the house's timeline, a place where a quiet war began. Not with force or gunfire, but with slow steps and a promise that didn't need to be sworn. The training room was tucked away on the lowest floor. As spacious as a luxury yoga studio, it held every type of physical therapy equipment, yet hadn't been used in weeks. I rechecked the neuromuscular stimulator, adjusted the knee support band, activated the muscle tracking system, then turned to Elliot, who sat in his wheelchair, hands resting on his thighs as if silently questioning whether he still deserved to step onto that hardwood floor. We'll start with reflexes on your left leg, 15 minutes per session, gradually increasing, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. What if I fall? Then I'll catch you, and if I fall? I tilted my head. You'll get up on your own. The first session lasted nearly an hour. Elliot didn't complain, but sweat ran down his forehead. His hands trembled as they gripped the standing bar. I didn't offer encouragement. I stayed beside him, adjusting posture, slowing the pace whenever I saw his eyes darken with dizziness. When he completed his 10th step between the parallel bars, I nodded. Good, he panted, leaning against the bench. You're not like the others. I know. I shut off the machine, removed the braces, wiped the floor with disinfectant cloths, then wheeled him back to his room. On the way, he said nothing more, but his gaze grew quieter, like he was holding back something not yet ready to say. From that night on, every evening became ritual. I pretended to sleep at 10, lay still for a while, then quietly slipped out with a compact medical kit and a notebook coded in symbols. Elliot was always waiting, silent in the dark. He never asked why I wasn't afraid, and I never asked why he hadn't given up. We worked like accomplices. No thanks, no praise, only mutual trust. And I began to search. By day, I fulfilled every duty of a model nurse, checking blood pressure, monitoring meds, reporting to Hannah, but whenever I had a chance, I slipped into the private library, where Elliot once stored the company's operational data. Most of the documents had been cleared out, but I found an external hard drive deeply embedded beneath the desk, locked with biometric access. I brought it to Elliot after our 9th session. He looked at the device, a spark of caution flashing in his eyes. Where did you find this? Bottom right drawer. He took it, scanned his fingerprint, the light turned green. I had never seen him this silent as the files appeared one by one. Financial records, internal meeting notes, corporate charter drafts, and a series of contracts signed under his name, all in the exact same font. I flipped through them. One was a transfer of 51% of shares to Langley Transition Holdings, a shell company registered in Nevada. Another detailed the delegation of voting rights at the upcoming shareholder meeting. What made me pause was a photo of a signature. I recognized it immediately. Uneven pressure, an overextended tailstroke. Exactly the style Charlotte used back in high school. I had seen it when she signed the wedding invitations with Travis. "This isn't your signature," I said quietly. Elliot didn't answer, he just stared at the screen, his hands clenching. "I know. I've known since the second week after the accident. But at the time, I didn't have enough proof. And no one believed me." I didn't ask why he hadn't called the police. This was corporate law, ownership. The kind of power outsiders couldn't penetrate without absolute certainty. I was the only one not bought by Charlotte, not swayed by Travis, not bound to their financial network. Elliot trusted me. I was now part of something bigger, a truth that needed to come out. We kept training every night, and each day I read more internal emails. I studied how Charlotte staged meetings. I reviewed surveillance footage in the mansion, caught her and Travis holding private discussions in the West Wing hallway. I documented everything, not as a nurse, but as a witness. Elliot progressed from 4 steps to 6, then 8. Each step proof that he was still capable, that real power didn't lie in paper or a boardroom seat, but in awareness and patience. I don't recall exactly what time I slipped into the library that night. I only remember the wind howling against the window panes loud enough to mask the soft click of the lock. Hannah had warned me, ground floor after midnight has no patrol, but you've got exactly 40 minutes before the system logs motion again. I didn't turn on the main lights. Under the soft sensor glow of a desk lamp, I traced the numbered leather-bound files. Each one thick, sealed, mostly company. But in the bottommost drawer, far in the back, I found a brown envelope tied with red string. I placed it on the table, opened it, and I saw my name. No, not mine. Travis J. Walker. Charlotte E. Langley. A prenuptial agreement. Signed February 5th, 2 weeks after my engagement was called off. I read the first line, heart pounding as if someone might catch me at any second. In the event that Mr. Elliot Langley is absent or deemed legally incompetent to participate in the special shareholder meeting on March 28th, the voting rights and corresponding shares will be equally divided between Party A, Charlotte Langley, and Party B, Travis Walker. I bit my lip hard enough to draw blood. Everything I had once suspected now sat plain in black and white. Charlotte didn't steal Travis for love, and he didn't walk away by accident. They weren't a couple by fate. They signed a pact, a financial alliance, not a marriage. I turned to the appendices. Asset division clauses post-marriage. Legal control terms in the event one party becomes incapacitated. A stock allocation schedule listing Langley Transition Holdings LLC. Same name as the shell company in Elliot's documents. I don't know how long I stood there, but the sound of wheelchair wheels on hardwood startled me. "Elliot?" He stood in the doorway, face cloaked in shadow, only his eyes catching the light like 2 old embers. "You found it." I closed the file, my voice hoarse with anger. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this contract?" Elliot slowly wheeled in, his eyes never leaving the document. "Because I wasn't sure. If you were brave enough to see everything." I set the folder on the table, my hands trembling slightly. "How long have you let them manipulate you?" Elliot stopped beside the bookshelf, gripping the wheelchair's handles tightly. "I've known Travis since he was an intern, thought he was smart, resourceful, principled. But it only took one opportunity for him to sell out everything he ever learned. And Charlotte," I cut in. Elliot paused. "Charlotte isn't my daughter." I stood frozen. "Marlene, my wife, couldn't have children. But one of her old friends had a little girl, lost her mother. Her father had once been my biggest rival in the defense tech industry, but went bankrupt after a lawsuit. I thought it was a way to help, and to give a child a chance." I exhaled slowly, feeling the coolness of the tiles beneath my feet. "So she grew up here, in this estate, but was never biologically yours?" "I raised her as my own, gave her everything, but I failed to see, or maybe chose not to see, that her loyalty wasn't to this family, but to someone else." Elliot turned his wheelchair slightly to face me. "Her biological father. He died 8 years ago, but before he passed he gave his daughter one mission: to reclaim everything he believed I had stolen. Everything started connecting like haunting puzzle pieces. Charlotte always knew how to disarm people. Travis, ambitious but never the mastermind, she was the strategist, and I was nothing more than a line in their long-term blueprint, someone unworthy of keeping but who needed to be discarded gently. What did they trick you into signing? He lowered his voice. A power of attorney. They don't know I revoked the original, but if I'm not present at the upcoming shareholder meeting, all those terms will activate automatically. And then, the company I built with my own hands will be gone. I clenched my fists, glancing again at the contract. How much time do we have? 19 days. Only 19 days to get a man from a wheelchair to standing before a board of directors, to expose 2 traitors, and for me, the woman they abandoned erased like a blemish, to walk into the game on my own 2 feet. I raised my head, locking eyes with Elliot. Do you trust me? Do you? I don't trust anyone, but I'm not afraid anymore. Elliot recovered faster than anyone expected. Some days he trained 3 times, each session over 15 minutes. Sometimes his leg muscles trembled from fatigue, but he never complained, never asked to stop. He said, if someone like Travis can stand in front of the board without shame, then I have no excuse to sit still because of pain. We rebuilt everything. Deleted emails, altered documents, testimony from 2 former assistants Charlotte had abruptly let go. I used a false identity to contact them, arranged meetings at a cafe off the island. One brought an old external drive. The other had an audio recording of an internal meeting where Charlotte declared she would proceed with a swift takeover if he doesn't wake up in time. We backed up the files to 3 drives. One stayed at the estate, one I kept in my lab coat, one we sent to Elliot's private attorney, Mr. Becker, the only person outside the mansion we trusted. Hannah, always the silent observer, didn't intervene, didn't ask. But each night she left a tray of tea and hot towels in the training room. One evening, she paused beside me, her eyes tinged with quiet fatigue. You know this could cost you everything, don't you? I only replied, I've already lost everything once, and I survived. The night of the shareholder meeting, a light rain fell over Seattle. The conference room was on the 40th floor of Langley Dynamics, where city lights cut through the windows like slashes of glass. Elliot wore a charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, obsidian cufflinks, exactly like the last time he walked into a boardroom before the accident. But this time, he carried a cane, and I, dressed in nursing uniform, walked beside him not as his nurse, but as the only person still tethering him to reality in a play rewritten by others. We took the private elevator. Elliot stared straight ahead. As the elevator stopped, he turned to me, his voice low. If I fall, I responded quickly, I'll catch you. The boardroom doors opened. The space was elegant and still, like a stage awaiting its cue. The click of heels, the clink of glasses, the tap of keyboards all ceased the moment Elliot Langley entered, walking unaided but for a cane. A ripple of whispers spread like a chain reaction. An executive raised his brow in shock. A board member half rose from his seat. Charlotte, standing beside Travis near the main podium, turned toward us, eyes wide in disbelief. Travis froze. The smile on his lips collapsed, cracking like porcelain under pressure. Elliot walked straight to the podium, his cane tapping a slow rhythm on the hardwood floor. I followed behind, arms holding the file folder. No one said a word. He turned on the microphone, his deep voice steady and calm as it filled the room. I apologize for my prolonged absence, but today I've returned. Charlotte stepped forward, trying to sound composed. Father, I didn't know about this. Why didn't anyone inform us? Because this isn't a welcome, this is a declaration. He opened the folder, pulled out 3 copies in transparent sleeves. I'm here today to request the annulment of all contracts signed between February 12th and March 10th on grounds of forgery, coercion, and violation of company bylaws. Travis stepped forward, voice sharp. This is slander, you have no proof. Elliot didn't look at him. He turned to the board. Audio recordings, original emails, testimony from former staff who were forced out. It's all here. Travis turned to Charlotte, whispering something. She bit her lip. Elliot's tone turned colder. I once trusted you, until I realized I was merely a pawn in a game led by the very daughter I raised. The room fell silent. Charlotte blurted out, I did nothing wrong. You handed over control. I only carried on. Elliot asked curtly, and the prenuptial agreement with Travis, was that coincidence? No one answered. I placed the hard drive on the table, eyes locked ahead. This contains all data from Mr. Langley's personal devices, including unauthorized access times tied to Charlotte Langley's account. The board's attorney stepped forward to receive it, conferred briefly, then turned back. Mr. Langley, do you wish to motion for reinstatement of executive authority and immediate suspension of the two involved parties? The vote was held on the spot. No abstentions, no one sided with Charlotte and Travis. When the results were announced, I glanced at Elliot. He didn't waver. No hands reached for him. He didn't need them. And for the first time since the accident, the spotlight no longer fell on a broken man, but on someone who had reclaimed everything on his own 2 feet. The silence in the boardroom after the vote lasted less than 3 seconds, but in my mind it rang out like a long ceremonial bell. An ending to months of manipulation, deception, and being cast aside like something disposable. But for Charlotte and Travis, it was only the beginning of a downfall they never saw coming. Charlotte remained at the center of the room, her face pale beneath a mask of control. She turned to Elliot, her eyes flaring with unhidden rage. Do you really think you can just throw me away like that, after everything I've done for Langley Dynamics? Elliot didn't respond right away. He quietly took a step back with his cane, his voice calm and chillingly even. No one was thrown away, Charlotte. You simply chose to side with those who value power over integrity. And every choice comes with a price. Travis stepped forward, perhaps for the first time all evening actually trying to say something. I didn't know Charlotte had done these things. I thought it was a legal authorization. Elliot turned to him. The disappointment was gone from his eyes. Only the weariness of a man who had seen too much remained. You once called me your first mentor. I believed that if you give a young person the right opportunity at the right time, they'll learn to stand tall on their own. But you didn't learn how to walk. You learned how to cut corners. And you chose the slickest slope. One of the board members stood, holding a copy of the legal documentation. Based on the evidence provided, the board unanimously votes to suspend all executive roles and representative rights of Charlotte Langley and Travis Walker in Langley Dynamics. Their voting shares are frozen pending the completion of an internal investigation. Charlotte let out a short, sharp laugh, shrill as shattered glass. You people have no idea who my father was. He could flip this entire board in a day if he wanted to. Elliot raised an eyebrow, unfazed. He's no longer here, and even if he were, I doubt he'd want to see his daughter become a manipulator without boundaries. A security officer entered and whispered to the legal representative. Moments later, a formal announcement was made, no longer veiled in politeness. All assets under Charlotte Langley's name, including company shares, real estate, and affiliated accounts, will be temporarily frozen under the recommendation of internal review. A sealing order has been sent to the state's financial regulatory office. Travis didn't move, his body stiff, eyes locked in disbelief. Charlotte turned to him, whispering something with an unmistakable tone of threat. He shook his head and stepped away from her. An elderly shareholder stood and walked toward Elliot. Mr. Langley, do you have a nomination for someone to assume interim executive leadership? Elliot turned, his gaze lingering on me a moment longer than usual. I tensed. But he didn't say my name. Instead, he offered a name I hadn't expected. Thomas Becker, my private attorney, the only one who hasn't been bought by profit or promises. A nod of agreement began to ripple through the seats. Charlotte turned away. Travis lowered his head. Elliot stepped back. Together, we turned and walked out of the boardroom. Each step of Elliot's echoed on the stone floor like the drumbeat of someone returning from the front lines, not carrying trophies, but carrying justice. After that board meeting, Elliot never returned to the office again. He delegated all transition work to Thomas Becker and the legal team, then quietly returned to Whidbey as if he had never left. There were no press conferences, no statements, and certainly no media appearances. But everyone who had been in that room understood. the founder of Langley Dynamics, had stepped out of the shadow of power, fully and on his own terms. His health visibly improved by the day. Every morning he came down the stairs without his cane, slowly but without hesitation. I stayed at the estate, shifting from nurse to special executive advisor. A title Elliot himself proposed when he handed me a new job description, along with a project file for launching a tech-integrated medical recovery center. "I was once the man who refused therapy," Elliot said on the afternoon he formally announced his retirement. "But because I was wrong, I want to create a place where patients won't have to fight alone the way I did." The center was named the Whidbey Recovery Institute, located about a 20-minute drive from the main estate, on over 7 acres of land donated by Elliot. I was the first invited to lead the initial phase. From recruiting medical staff, designing treatment protocols, to building the pilot operating system. No board, no outdated hierarchy. We worked like two people who had survived a long war. I never asked why he didn't fully retire. He never asked why I hadn't left. We both understood that our connection wasn't something that could be named by traditional social definitions. Not mentor and student, not friends, and certainly not a sentiment that fit any neat label. It was something born from nights soaked in sweat, from training, from silence behind a locked library door, from moments when we looked in the same direction without needing to say a word. One time, as I flipped through the third-floor layout of the center, Elliot stood behind me, his voice softer than usual. "Did you ever think you'd be here, doing this? I used to think I'd get married, live in a high-rise downtown Seattle, and schedule shifts around my husband's meetings. I used to think I'd die in a hospital bed, alone, drowned by the very company I built." Evenings at the estate were different now. Hannah no longer just left tea and hot towels in silence. She often sat with us on the porch, sharing old stories from Boston, where she once served as head nurse in a military hospital, before retiring. Sometimes Elliot brought a chair into the kitchen, trying to make the carrot ginger soup I once said I liked. He sliced the carrots too thick, forgot the salt, and nearly dumped the whole pot into the sink. But he stayed with it until the end. "I didn't think you knew how to use a knife," I teased. "I didn't think you knew how to forgive," he replied. I didn't laugh, but my heart warmed in a strange, quiet way. Some things don't need a reply, they exist, and that's enough. One day, while organizing old documents in the library, I came across the small ebony box that once held the contracts Elliot and I used as evidence at the board meeting. It was inside a locked cabinet, but now left open. I asked Hannah, she simply shrugged. He said, "It doesn't need to be locked anymore. What needed to be said has been said, and what's left doesn't need to be hidden." That evening, I stepped out to the back garden where Elliot often walked after dinner. The moon was high, its light falling on the stone steps like shards of broken mirror from the sky. He was followed by the row of freshly planted daisies, arms folded behind his back. "You know," I said. "Do. I didn't think I'd stay here this long." Elliot didn't turn, his voice low. "I didn't think I'd need anyone, to." A brief silence, then he tilted his head and looked at me. "But you're here, and I know it's not because of any debt." We stood like that, beside each other. There was no touch, no clear label, but we were never apart. What we had didn't need a name or rules or boundaries. Sometimes, that kind of quiet connection is all that remains, when everything else is gone. 1 year later, I officially opened my private rehab clinic, Quinn Integrative Therapy. No flashy sign, no aggressive marketing campaign, just a small 2-story building with rows of windows facing Green Lake, cream-colored walls, bright and airy treatment rooms, and stone walkways with simple patterns. My first patient was a former serviceman who'd lost a leg. The second was an elderly teacher recovering from a stroke. None of them knew I had once been left at a luxury cafe with a broken engagement, or stood in the middle of a boardroom full of schemes. I didn't open the clinic to prove anything to anyone. I opened it because I had once been at the edge of a cliff, exhausted, silent, convinced I'd never have a clean start again. Every now and then, headlines about Charlotte Langley still popped up online. Once she gave an exclusive interview to a tabloid, crying on live stream, calling me the one who destroyed her family and exploited her father's trust to steal the company. Beneath the video were thousands of comments. Most of them didn't side with her. The public isn't as naive as she believed. They saw Elliot walk up to the podium that day, and they remembered the evidence released afterward, detailed, undeniable. The truth always carries weight, even if it arrives late. One April morning, I received a package. Neatly wrapped in dark paper, no sender listed. Inside was a handwritten letter in bold, tidy black ink. I recognized it instantly. Elliot. Madeline. I spent my whole life building a legacy, but only at the very end did I realize that a true legacy doesn't live in numbers. It lives in what we leave behind in others. If anyone deserves to rewrite this family's story, it's you. Thank you for staying when everyone else with blood ties walked away. Wishing you peace. E.N. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the locked drawer of my office, not to keep it as a trophy, but as a reminder that trust is never granted, it is built. Layer by layer, through silence, hardship, and the simple decision not to walk away. Travis reached out once, not in person, through a lawyer, a short message. Wants to talk. If forgiveness is possible. I left the message unanswered. Closure didn't need a reply, because when he gave me that old ring in the cafe, he also gave me the most painful gift of all, freedom. And I had learned how to use it well. I still live on Whidbey Island, though not at the estate anymore. I rent a small house by the cliffs where every morning I face the ocean and feel like I'm standing in the middle of the world. Small, but steady. Hannah visits every weekend, bringing baked goods and a pot of chamomile tea. Elliot rarely leaves his new farm in southern Oregon, where he grows lavender and researches neuro-responsive tech in medical rehabilitation. We still write letters, sometimes just a single line. Planted 3 rows of basil, sending you some seeds. One day a patient asked me, "Do you ever wish things had turned out differently?" I shook my head and smiled. No, without everything I lost, I wouldn't have had the chance to find myself. I'm not a princess. I don't have a castle, a fairy tale wedding, or a knight in shining armor. But I wear an invisible crown, forged from sleepless nights, hard choices, and getting back up when no one else stood beside me. I used to think I was the cast-off, the extra in someone else's story. But in the end, I came to realize I was never the supporting role. I am the one rewriting the narrative, the main character in my own life. If you've ever been in my position, pushed aside, erased from someone's life without a word, does this feel familiar? Have you ever walked away in silence only to one day realize you didn't need permission to step onto the stage of your own life? Truly want to know, what did this story make you feel? If you were me, would you have forgiven Travis? Would you have left, Whidbey, or stayed as I did? Share your thoughts in the comments, because maybe your story will be the one someone out there needs to hear. And if you love stories about family, betrayal, forgiveness, healing, and the quiet strength of standing back up in your own way, follow this channel so you don't miss what comes next. Life doesn't always go as we dream, but it's those unexpected turns that shape us in quiet, enduring ways. I'll see you in the next story.